Hey world, what up? So the Philadelphia 76ers have been in shambles from the beginning of the NBA season heading off to now, stating with injuries, team chemistry not being where it needs to be, overloading players with playing time, playing catch up, and not having a mix and match to start off the NBA season. And there was high expectations for Philadelphia in the crew. Looking into the NBA Eastern Conference landscape, we expected the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, and then the Philadelphia 76ers to be in that mix and match to go off fighting for a conference finals appearance and a win to represent the East. We're a month into the NBA season with 10 games coming to play, and we do have the Philadelphia 76ers coming to a couple of injuries, starting off with Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid's only played one game this NBA season, and within his status, he mentioned that he's not going to play any back-to-back games for the rest of the season, let alone most likely for his career. He is at 30 years of age in the NBA, playing around 8 to 9 seasons or so, starting from the 2016 season, or actually if I'm not wrong, I believe the 2015-2016 season he missed back-to-back, and then started off the 2017 season as a quote-unquote rookie playing for the 76ers, winning one MVP back in 2022, never making a conference finals appearance, and then now having a new landscape of players with Philadelphia. The first stint being with Ben Simmons with that experiment, which they lost in 7 games to the Atlanta Hawks and the Toronto Raptors. Those were the only 2 series that went 7 games. They were closest to potentially reaching the conference finals, and let alone, I did remember now, they did go 7 games against the Boston Celtics when they had James Harden, which they were up 3-2, and they lost the following 2 games in the Game 7 massacre in Boston, to which Joel Embiid could not make a conference finals once again. Now we're entering here the 2024-2025 NBA season, and Philadelphia did bring in Paul George within the offseason, departing from the LA Clippers, and Paul George signed a 3-year, $155 million contract with Philadelphia. Paul George does have a recent history in his career of having injuries, but let alone sometimes he is able to be durable to play in the playoffs. But they did call him Playoff P. Paul George does not be able to get it done when it comes to most of his teams. The most success we've seen was earlier in his career with the Indiana Pacers, going back-to-back conference finals against the Miami Heat, led by the big three of LeBron, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade. And ever since the injury of Paul George back in, I believe, 2015 or so with Indiana, who broke his leg, he was able to make an appearance back to being in great shape, departing the Pacers to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who was top 3 in MVP voting. Trying to remember what year that was. I believe around 2019 or so. Playing 2 seasons with Oklahoma City Thunder, moving on to making that trade to play with Kawhi Leonard with the LA Clippers, which they made only one conference finals appearance, which Kawhi was hurt against the Jazz and the Phoenix Suns. Now, the LA Clippers within that series in 2021, led by Paul George and the young scrappy crew, lost in 6 games to the Phoenix Suns. And ever since, the LA Clippers either missed the playoffs or lost in the first round. Paul George elected to go to the Philadelphia 76ers to join Joel Embiid and a young rising Tyrese Maxey. Philadelphia, as of right now, is at a 2-9 record, 14th at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And there's questions of, are the Philadelphia 76ers too much in shambles to where it's too far, too late for them to play catch-up? And we saw last season, Joel Embiid was pretty much the favorite to win MVP around 55 games or so in the NBA. He did have an injury that let him go around 18 to 20 games, which discredited him from the MVP vote, and as well as Philadelphia had to play catch-up, to which they made a 7th seed appearance, playing the New York Knicks and losing in 6 games. Nick Nurse and the crew have a lot of items to address within now. Let's jump in here and give more of a take into Philadelphia and their shambles.
After Paul George signed with Philly in July, I really don't think anyone had the Sixers in last slates 3 weeks into the season, but it's just been one thing after another, starting with Joel Embiid, whose left knee kept him from being ready to start the season, and now he's serving a 3-game suspension. Shams reports that he is expected to make his season debut on Tuesday, but then you got Paul George, who missed the first 5 games of the year as well. His return, it hasn't really changed anything in the win column yet. PG said he didn't recognize that they were down 3 instead of 2 in his first game back, and then he wasn't able to get revenge against the Clippers in his second game on the floor. And the hits keep coming because Tyrese Maxey was leading the league in minutes and field goal attempts, really carrying the load for Philly, and now he will miss the next 2 weeks with a hamstring injury. And all of this.
And real quickly, Tyrese Maxey is going to be out for the next 1 or 2 weeks with a sore right hamstring. This is a situation to where this team is old, there's injuries, and you're putting a lot of pressure and minutes on Tyrese Maxey. And coming to a result of it, they're not winning games, and let alone that Tom Thibodeau effect is going to have an overhaul in these players, which we saw with New York last season and the NBA playoffs, with players who had to the roster pretty much had to go 7-8 deep in the playoffs. Injuries arose, and these players were able to be out in the second round against Indiana. Same principles come in here when you have Paul George and Joel Embiid out for a remainder of the beginning of the season. Tyrese Maxey, the heavy load's been going on him, and we've seen that effects when it comes down to him. This team is old to begin with. You have Kyle Lowry at 38 years of age. You have Reggie Jackson at 34. You have Paul George at 34. You have Eric Gordon at 35. Embiid's now 30 years of age, and you have Andre Drummond at 31. The young cats out here are going to be Tyrese Maxey at 24 years of age. Kelly Oubre's around 28 to 29. You do have Caleb Martin, who's a veteran, who's at 29. Kenyon Martin Jr. is around 23, 24. And the new guy they brought in, Yabusele, is around 27, 28. So this team doesn't have a lot of fresh legs to begin with. And you're talking about a long spectrum in the NBA season. And when your two main players, Joel Embiid and Paul George, do have injuries within their history, and they're both 30 and 34 years of age.
Has led to the 76ers starting 1-6. And you might say, oh, well, it's still early in the season. It is, but over the last 25 years, only 3 teams have begun a season 1-6 or 0-7 and gone on to make the playoffs. And that's out of more than 75 teams having had the chance to do this. So,
and looking at these 3 teams here in the NBA spectrum, that within the first 7 games, the worst, went to loss column, and then they did able to make the playoffs. These teams did not make it far. They did not win the NBA championship to begin with. Number 2, they did not make it to the NBA championship round. They did not make it far into the NBA playoffs. So pretty much what history is telling us, which we do expect the 76ers to get healthy later on and for them to bounce back, that this team is destined to either be a first-round exit, most likely, if anything, a second-round exit to begin with.
Brian, it's early. Is it too early to worry about the 76ers?
Yes and no. I'm worried if I'm a Philadelphia fan to begin with due to their injuries and learning that Joel Embiid's not going to play back-to-back games anymore. This team has a losing record when Joel Embiid does not play, and they don't have enough makeup to pretty much win games without Joel Embiid's absence. Now, number 2, we've seen the stress of Tyrese Maxey being injured due to Joel Embiid not playing. Is this going to result into other players like Paul George as well? So on and so forth. Other moves need to be made in Philadelphia. They need more size. The only 2 big bodies you have Joel Embiid and Andre Drummond. At your 4, you have Caleb Martin, who is 6'5". You have Yabusele, who's not going to start, but he is 6'8". And besides from that, Kenyon Martin at 6'6". This team needs more size at their 4, maybe even a potential third-string center like a JaVale McGee that can come in, maybe a Dwight Howard or so could be useful. And I could potentially see them. They could use a backup shooting guard, someone who's a veteran out there. And again, he is a little older, but then again, I think a Patrick Beverley could be pretty good for this makeup and team. But overall for Philadelphia, they are looking like a first or second round exit as right now. Now, the good thing they do have within the Eastern Conference landscape is within the Eastern Conference, the East is not heavy. It's very weak out there. After the 4th seed, everyone has a losing record to begin with. Now, I do expect some of these teams to bounce back within the standings, such as the New York Knicks. the Indiana Pacers, potentially the Miami Heat to an extent, and question marks on the Milwaukee Bucks, especially if they do fire Doc Rivers, or if they were to make other moves as well. But Philadelphia, I expect them to bounce back, pretty much reach around that 6th seed or so. Maybe the highest they can get is a 5th. That is doubtful. We'll see what happens to it, but we're only 10 games in the NBA season.
It is a little bit too early, and here's why. Because the warm blanket that they put on at night is the Eastern Conference standings. Because
Correct.
as bad as it looks for Philly, when you look at where they are in the East, they're not actually that far. They're 10 good days away from being in 5th place. And look, no one in Philadelphia is going to say on the record what I'm about to tell you, but internally I'm going to tell you what the reality is. The reality is this team knows if it can get in the top 6, if this Embiid issue and the injuries and the back-to-backs and all of that other stuff and the load management can get them into the top 6 and avoid the play-in, and they're healthy, they like their chance against anybody. And that's where they're really, gunning for.
That surprises me.
And that's complicated to thread that needle.
Yeah.
But that is a reality that they're looking at.
Well, every team's going to face adversity, right? No matter how good you are or how good your record is 7 games, 8 games in, they're hopefully this is their adversity, right? Problem is, you'd rather have it come later. Now you have no room for error. It's coming early for this team. I think the big question is, how much runway are they going to have with all 3 of their guys together? I hate seeing star players hurt.
Yeah.
I think we all do, right? If you love basketball, you want to see Embiid play. He's one of the best players ever to play, so you want him out there. So there's frustration even from a fan perspective. They want him to play. The thing is they need a good chunk of games with Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George.
Random thought that came to me. If there's going to be the disappearance of Paul George, let alone Joel Embiid, when it comes down to injuries, an underrated player they could bring in, potentially, which I can't believe he's still a free agent. They can get him on the veteran minimum. It's going to be Lonnie Walker. They could use a backup, too, to begin with, to back up Kelly Oubre Jr. And Lonnie Walker is a player who can handle the ball on his own, get his own bucket. He's around 24, 25 years of age and has a lot of potential out there. Keep an eye out if I'm Daryl Morey to go for that.
Find out. Let's just see what it is. The question there is, if you look at this, is 55 games possible if Embiid doesn't do the back-to-back.
I love according to Bob Myers.
Yeah, that's not this is not my subjective opinion. This is just factual. And who knows? Maybe we had plans with the Warriors where we're going to rest this guy and he's not playing back-to-backs and we're going to do this, and all of a sudden the plans go out the window, right?
How quickly?
Well, when things change, right? You may have if they're facing getting out of the play-in and Embiid needs to play some back-to-backs at the end of the season to get to the 6th seed, like Brian said, he's going to play. This isn't like etched in stone, so I think that's a plan. But forget about all that. I think they need to see a good chunk of games where they're playing together and see what it is.
Well, every time we talk about Philly, it's always talking about how they could go out and score a touchdown. They need to worry about how can they get a first down. They need to win some games. How can they win games now? They can't look in the future or the last part of the season. What can they do now? No Tyrese Maxey for the next No Tyrese Maxey for the next 2-3 weeks. Joel Embiid is coming back in 2 games. We don't know how he's going to look. You played Paul George and got him the biggest offseason addition. You paid him max money. Okay, PG, you got some pretty good role players alongside of you.
One thing they got to worry about. Okay, they're 1-6.
Yeah,
they can't be going 2-13.
No, it's
they got to stop the bleeding.
That's what I say.
I think another good pick that could potentially happen within this team if they are trying to bring in more of that size. I'm looking at a potential trade to bring in Marvin Bagley from the Washington Wizards to plug and play, to have Marvin Bagley as my starting 4 with this Philadelphia team. Marvin Bagley's around 6'10" to 6'11", who can be a defensive-minded, kind of like a Serge Ibaka type player back in the Oklahoma City Thunder 2012 through 2015, where you had a front court of Steven Adams and Serge Ibaka. I'm kind of looking at right now, would it be the most ideal fit? We'll see. But if you can make a trade package of getting rid of Kenyon Martin Jr., potentially Ricky Council as well, and Jared McCain, and a draft pick or 2 for Marvin Bagley, I could look at a potential starting lineup at Tyrese Maxey at the 1, Kelly Oubre at the 2, Paul George at the 3, at the 4, Marvin Bagley at the 5, Joel Embiid. And if you really wanted to, if you wanted to put Kelly Oubre off the bench, potentially even Caleb Martin, slip him in at that 2 or 3, kind of food for thought within there.
But guys, more than any other sport, when I sit next to my owner, we'd lose games, we'd start off And they'd say, what's going on? I'd say, I don't know, we have $100 million sitting on our bench, right? It just doesn't work. You got minimum guys out there. So I get it. It's the result business, but it's a long season.
But I will say, being out with the 76ers during their training camp, what I heard from Joel Embiid, from Paul George was, hey, we needed to be able to have other folks to keep things afloat. Sure. This is getting put to the test.
We'll leave it off there with Philadelphia. Let's see if they're able to stay durable, make some other changes, able to gel pretty well, and hopeful for the return of Tyrese Maxey. They do have a couple of games that are coming up against the Orlando Magic. Miami's on the schedule, Memphis, the Clippers, and the Rockets. These are pretty formidable teams. If they're able to go at least 3-2 within that stretch and able to bounce it off within the remainder of the season, coming into December, they'll be on good track. But we'll see a little more when it comes to that. All right.